Someplace up here, I'm supposed to have a speech. Where is it?
Right under here. George is supposed to put it up for you.
There it is. Thank you. Hey, thank you, everybody. You know, I just want to tell you on that last video where Teddy and I were watching the Red Sox in the World Series, he's a coward. He ran in the other room a couple of times. I had to bring him back. Come on, they're going to win. He was a coward. Thank you so much for all the nice things that were said about me, most of which were grossly exaggerated. You know, I was going to make a long speech tonight, 3 hours or so, but I cut it down to 2.5 hours, so most of you will be out of here by 1 o'clock in the morning, I think. I do thank the committee. They've worked very, very hard, and it's absolutely true. No work has been done in my office for the last month. Debbie and Sharon and everybody have secret meetings. I don't know what the hell is even going on. They're disappearing all the time, but they had a good time. They really did have a good time. And I'm just so happy to see this big crowd tonight. I've done well greeting people. I've remembered everybody but a couple of names. I was proud of myself to do that, and I thank you all who came over and said hello to me and Penny. It's been a wonderful night, and I do thank that whole committee and the Board of Selectmen who've done such a great job. For some reason, I feel compelled tonight to begin by telling you the story of my life. Don't worry, it won't take long. I'm a Hyde Park boy, all the way there, including Hyde Park High. I had great parents, both from Ireland. When my father got off the boat around the time of World War I, he must have been taken directly to Fenway Park because he loved the Red Sox dearly. I picked up that love from him. Frankly, I thought that if I couldn't pitch for the Red Sox, I'd go to work in a local grocery store when I graduated from high school, and that's the truth. But a good friend pointed me to Northeastern and to civil engineering. I managed to graduate with very ordinary marks and a Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering in 1950. Around that time, I met Paul McGran, whose brother John is sitting right there, the late Paul McGran, and eventually his pretty sister Marilyn. He was a third baseman on various club teams we played on for years, and I was a pitcher. Marilyn and I fell in love and got engaged just in time for me to be drafted into the Army for the Korean War in December of 1950. Anyone who has spent time with me has heard the story of how I spent 18 months in Washington, D.C., but the last 6 months of my service in Okinawa. There, all I did was to build 2 carnivals for the guys who had been doing the real fighting in Korea. 2 carnivals the last 6 months. Not very tough duty. Meryl and I got married when I got out of the Army in April of 1953, hoping to have at least 6 kids, and that's the truth. In those days, that was a normal number of children that a couple would aspire to. My first real job, which lasted for 13.5 years, was in Lexington, first as a civil engineer, but eventually as a director of public works and town engineer. I left the town of Lexington in 1967, thinking I was going to be a great writer. I wasn't. And for the next 8 years, I worked in the private sector as an editor of a construction magazine and as an executive director of several contracts associations. Along the way, Marilyn and I started having those kids. First Matthew, then when it seemed like we couldn't have any more biologically, by adoption. All babies, Judith, Kathleen, Peter, and Christopher, they're all here tonight. By the time Chris was adopted, Marilyn had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Then, against all odds, she got pregnant, and we had a sick child, Teddy, the nasty guy on that TV, in 1966. In 1973, Marilyn was diagnosed with breast cancer. In late 1974, Mike Dukakis was elected governor. He named Fred Salvucci, whom I had gotten to know when we both were involved in the study of transportation in Greater Boston, as the Secretary of Transportation. Fred wanted me as his Commissioner of Public Works. I really don't know why. And I was sworn in on January of 1975. I went from supervising 4 employees in my job as Executive Director of a Contracts Association to being in charge of nearly 4,000 employees as a State Commissioner of Public Works. Marilyn's cancer had spread. and she fell seriously ill in the summer of 1976. Curiously, mysteriously, twice in the last few months of her life, she asked me to be sure that when she died, she would be buried from St. Susanna's Church in Dedham, and also to be sure that Penny Martin, with whom she had recently become friends, would sing Amazing Grace at her funeral mass. Marilyn died on November 6, 1976, and Penny Martin did sing Amazing Grace at her funeral mass. On the strengths of that strange and mysterious request, which I then believed and still do was a strong hint from Marilyn, 4 months later, I proposed marriage to Penny. I did so, by the way, over the telephone, without ever going out on a date, knowing she had 8 kids, but never having met one of them. That's the truth. Eventually, of course, I did meet and grow to love Denise, Michelle, Keith, Kevin, Brian, Darren, Christopher, and Shannon. Penny accepted my proposal, knowing that I had 6 kids, but never having met any of them. We were married a year later, on November 25th, 1977. Our 40th anniversary is just around the corner. My 4 years as the commissioner were productive and exciting, but everything came crashing down in September of 1978 with the stunning defeat of Mike Dukakis by Ed King in the primary election for governor. I knew I was a goner. What was I to do? I had 14 kids, and we lived week to week in my paycheck. On Thursday of that week, I got a call from a friend who told me that John Mogan, the town manager of Norwood, had just resigned. I wasted no time. I sent off my resume on Friday morning. On Monday, I got a call from Walter Dempsey, the aforementioned Walter Dempsey, who was then chairman of the Board of Selectmen. He asked me one question: do you really want this job? I answered yes. He replied, you've got it. Absolutely true. So when I went for the public interview the very next week, it was a formality. It was done. I became the town manager of Norwood that quickly. 6 months later, our former town accountant, Mr. Robert Thornton, who was up here a few minutes ago, was hired just as quickly. The two of us have served in the town of Norwood a combined total of about 74 years. Not bad. A lot has happened since then. For one, I came home one day and Penny said she heard of a little 8-year-old boy named Ivan who needed to be adopted. He became number 15. The same thing happened a couple of years later, only this time it was 3 siblings, Sean, Charlotte, and Angela. That made the full complement of 18. Now, could all of our kids and their relatives who are here please stand up so people will know you really exist, please? All right, sit down. I have loved working here in the town of Norwood for 39 years. In that time, I've worked with 21 selectmen and selectwomen, including the present fine group of selectmen, 4 police chiefs, 4 fire chiefs, 4 DPW directors, 4 electric light department directors, 4 treasurer and tax collectors, 3 town accountants, 3 recreation directors, 2 building inspectors, 2 human resources officers. And I've had 3 wonderful secretaries. But in all that time, I've only had only one wonderful, hardworking, and loyal assistant town manager who never gets enough credit for what he has done and still continues to do for this town, Bernie Cooper. Bernie. I've really enjoyed working here all these years, you know that. I've always done my best to help make Norwood the best town it could be. You know, I love working on projects, the gazebo, the public safety building, the beautiful new Norwood High School. And you know, I was only a small part of some of those projects, not the gazebo, that was my idea. But the high school, I was a fringe player. There were 21 of us in that committee, And I loved that project. I loved it so much that on Saturdays I would come in, like I always do, to work, and I would go up to the high school and look to see how much progress was being made. I loved it, and I was so proud of being part of that committee, so proud of that absolutely beautiful, magnificent high school. It's just unbelievable. I was also involved in the DPW complex, and I'm going to tell you a story that I really shouldn't tell you now. First of all, Bob Thornton, I called Bob one day. We had a small committee of about 5 people. Bill Plasko was very instrumental at that time in trying to make the DPW happen, but we weren't going anywhere. I said to Bill, we have to enlarge the committee. Got to get like the high school committee. So we did. We enlarged it up to 19 or 20 people. Bob didn't want to get on the committee, I'll tell you the truth. You are going to be in the damn committee, do you understand? All right, he said, I would get on it. And then he wasn't sure that the project was really needed to be done, but he eventually got convinced. And we kept on working. We got to the point where we had an engineer, an owner's project manager, and we knew the project was going to cost $16 million. And I didn't know how we were going to get the money. I really didn't. I knew an override would not work because overrides work for police and fire stations. They work for schools. They don't work for public works people. People, they just plow the streets. What else they do? They're really wonderful people, actually. But it wouldn't work. So I was bemoaning that fact, and one day Bob called me and he said, John, what percentage of your workforce and equipment is going to be occupying the new facilities? I knew exactly what he was asking me. I said, what percentage do you want it to be? He said 60. I called up the head of the engineering company, and I said to him, what percentage of the building is going to be occupied by water and sewer persons? He said, what percentage do you want it to be? I said 60. The report came out, and it said that 60% of the cost of that building should be charged to water and sewer. Beautiful move. I don't know whether there's 13% or 90%. But we're able to build that beautiful facility, and I'm really proud of it. I'm also proud of stuff that people really don't kind of know too much about. The rubbish, the way we collect rubbish now, as soon as I saw the first example of mechanized rubbish collection with the big trucks coming by and picking up the carts and dumping them into the trucks rather than bending over and picking up little blue carts and carrying them out to the street, I knew I wanted to do it. And that was I always tried to be a step behind the selectmen. You know, that's the way to do it. If you have to stay in office, you got to stay behind your board. But in this case, curiously, I got ahead of the board, and it was a little bit nerve-wracking. The night we were going to make the presentation, I said to the folks when we got to that article in the warrant, or that part of the warrant, I said, we're going to do a little demonstration. People are saying that these new carts are going to be too heavy and too big for older people to push out to the curb and all that kind of stuff. I could feel the undercurrent. So tonight, I said, we're going to have a little demonstration, and Mr. Cooper and Mr. McDonough are going to come down, and Mr. Cooper and Mr. McDonough, John McDonough, the late John McDonough, came down to the front, and they had with them carts of rubbish, a lot of junky stuff. And they dumped all that stuff into one of these big rubbish carts, 96-gallon cart. And boy, it looked very imposing. And I said, we had a lottery, a little drawing earlier today, and the person that won the chance to come up here and demonstrate it is Marge McKenna. Marge McKenna was 75 years old at the time, weighed about 85 pounds, and she stepped out and she just tipped that cart back and ran up the aisle with it, and everybody applauded, and we were home free. We got it. Of course, nobody knew that we had practice on that Friday afternoon. But it worked anyway. We did a lot of things, and people have mentioned it. I've just loved all that kind of stuff. I'm proud of the leadership team I'm leaving for the new town manager, Tony Mazzucco. I'm handing off to him a terrific bunch of men and women who head up our various departments at the present time. It amazes me at how they work together and get things done without fanfare. I'm proud of each of them. In my 4 decades here, there have been many happy times, but some sad ones as well. Several good men and women who served Norwood as members of the Board of Selectmen and other boards have left us. Walter Dempsey was mentioned. Joe Curran, Marty Lydon, John Keneally, and Tommy Riolo are all gone, all members of the Board of Selectmen. One of my favorite fellow employees was the then planning director, Steve Costello. He died in May of 2014. Bernie, Steve, and I were daily luncheon companions. Steve had pulled himself up from the depths of alcoholism to a late, successful marriage and to be the stepfather of 2 teenagers. He was a guy's guy. No nonsense from Steve. I know he loved me, and he showed it. For instance, this is what he wrote on a birthday card one year. "You're a balloon head and a phony. Best wishes." Believe it or not, that's what I'm going to miss most of all, to be able to go to work each day and to sit with a wonderful group of men like Steve Costello and wonderful women too, working in ways to help people of this great town. I figured out a few years ago why I didn't retire when I was 65 or when I was 75, even when I was 85. It was because I enjoyed being relevant, being a part of the action that produced the results I mentioned earlier. And then recently I heard a major leaguer in radio say, in order to be a good baseball player in the major leagues, you've got to love the grind. I love the grind. Getting up, going to work, moving things along each day. I love it. And I will miss it. And I will miss all of you. Thank you all for coming here tonight. It's been an honor to have served with you, worked with you, all the citizens and residents of town Norwood for almost 4 decades. Thank you very much. I love you all. God bless you, and I pray you'll have a safe trip home. Thank you.